Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Season 9. What we loved, what we hated, what we might not agree on. We're going to duke it out in the Season 9 Fight Club, what's essential and what isn't. But before we start, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Melissa.
Sorry, you threw me off there. You don't usually start with me. I have been a fan of the show since the start. I'm a tech writer by day and a Supernatural fan every other part of the day. And you can find me online at your Facebook group, Supernatural TFWNC, where I'm usually causing trouble, stalking people, and just, being goofy.
Elektra.
I'm a writer and an editor, and I've too found Supernatural right at the pilot, and I've loved it ever since. And at least I've now left hell.
Carole.
I am a fan since season 3, started writing fanfic in 2012. You can find all my stories on AO3 under Firesign10, and I'm on Twitter under true_Firesign10.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and more. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all of the modern day stories are worlds where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home with a shotgun and a lot of salt. And I also do run the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook, as well as being here on Continual. So, season 9, we've got Gadriel. We've got Sam with his knickers in a twist for most of the season. We have the Mark of Kane and Metatron and Angel and Demon Wars and lots going on. So let's get talking about what you think were the most important episodes, or even if you want to start with which ones you liked and which ones you hated, whether they were important or not. Carole?
Well, season 9 is a very mixed bag for me. There are some fun episodes. There are some good episodes. There are some episodes that I kind of wanted to be over sooner. In the fun category, I'll just mention a couple. Certainly, I think Slumber Party is fun. We meet Dorothy, Charlie, I almost said Willow. Charlie Goes to Oz. The Wicked Witch. I enjoyed that. That's a fun episode. And Dog Dean Afternoon, right after it, is a fun episode where Dean is able to speak as an animal. Wait, no, which one? He is the animal. He is a dog. He is dog-like. He can understand the dogs. He has dog behavior. He's yelling at the pigeon. The other dogs are really amusing. It's a really cute episode. The only bone I had to pick with that, see what I did, is the German Shepherd's voice to me was all wrong. But it's a cute episode. It's a fun episode. So those two are fun. I think I really like the whole arc with the Mark of Kane, where they're dealing with Abaddon. They're tracking down what will kill her. They start on the path of finding the first blade, but then find out before the first blade, they have to find Kane and get the Mark of Kane. I love that arc. It's a really interesting arc. And let's just talk about Timothy Amundsen's performance as Kane. Man, he rocked that. He is so awesome as that. And you talk about your leonine mane there and everything, but he's so wonderful in that character. We also have Gadriel inside Sam. Real ethical dilemmas here because Dean was a little dodgy about getting him stuffed in there. Sam doesn't know. It's going to go wrong. You're waiting for that wing to drop, and it's not good. I liked how Ezekiel kind of had his own issues. He was an interesting character, at least. He was not a cookie cutter angel. We get a little taste though of sometimes the angels are just a little too prevalent at times, but we had a lot of other stuff at least to mix it up. So I won't say this is a great season, but there are certainly worse seasons. That's my
This is true.
quick and dirty.
Elektra?
I like that there was a solid arc. The whole, how are we going to deal with getting rid of Abaddon? And I like that there were sub arcs and there were some real pieces in there. And there's one thing I want to mention before I let it zip out of my head, never to be seen again, was the nods to what was going on in the real world at the time, which were the constant little background mentions of Game of Thrones. When, you know, we have to let something download for a really long time. Let's go off and like binge Game of Thrones for a while. Or we found a taxidermist and he was doing a rats dressed as Game of Thrones. There were the constant little pokes at it. There were a number of episodes I really liked. I particularly Firstborn, where we meet Kane, and it turns out that he is a serious badass. And come on, I kicked it off. Mother's Little Helper, where we finally get the payoff for Henry Winchester coming to visit. And we see how things went wrong when the men of letters sent 2 trainees off to go investigate something they thought wasn't a real big deal. And it turned out it was a huge deal. And how exactly Josie turned out to be a knight of hell. And I'm really glad they picked up that lost thread and gave it to us. Because now we understand how she came to be who she was. And that whole little bit and the tidbit of it was going to be Henry, but Josie loved him too much to let that happen to him. That was a big piece of it for me. But the whole follow through of, well, first we have the problem of Abaddon and we're going to solve that with the Mark Kane. Okay, now we've solved that. And then, well, we've got a whole, what are we going to do next season? And this is part of that building arc that starts now, and each season gets bigger and better from now until the finale. And I really like what they're starting to do from here on out.
Okay. Melissa?
This season had one of my all-time favorite episodes, Bad Boys. Bad Boys is John Winchester A+ parenting at its finest. You know, Dean does something stupid, he gets caught, and John leaves him there. But it turns out to be a good thing that John leaves him there, because this is Dean's chance to get the apple pie life. He's going to school like a normal kid. He's got chores like a normal kid. He's got normal kid chores. He's got a girlfriend. He's doing well in school. He's on the wrestling team. This is normal. This is the closest chance Dean has ever had to be normal, and he's thriving in it. And it's so great to see. And of course, John leaves him there until John needs him, and then he rolls up and wants Dean back. And there's a big dance that night, and Dean wants to go with this girl. And Dean's hesitating because the guy is like, you know, I'll fight for you to stay here. And you can see in Dean's face, yeah, maybe I could stay. And he looks out the window, and there's Sam leaning out a baby, you know, playing with an airplane. And Dean's expression just completely changes. He loves his brother so much that apple pie, nope, I got to go take care of my baby brother. And he's gone, and he's happy. He seems happy with the decision. And to me, this episode is like, this is the capsule for what their relationship is. Dean gave up apple pie at 16 when he had the shot. He could have been out of the life and normal as can be. And one look at Sam leaning out a window of a car, playing with a toy airplane, and that's it. He's done. He's back in with John, and he's dragged back into life. And I thought that that just really informs who those guys are so much that that's the episode to me that tells you what Dean is. So, but like there were lots of other episodes in this season that I liked, but that's the one that that's one of my favorites just all time.
Yeah. I thought that this was an overall strong season, and you've named a lot of my favorites. I think it's also a season that built, this is where we were having the boys have to be at odds with each other for half the season, and then they make up, and then they're not at odds. And I thought this was one of the most trumped up excuses, thinnest excuses for them being at odds, because Sam doesn't even finish his sentence. And then Dean's got his knickers in a twist. And Dean doesn't understand Sam's issue about Gadriel until season 14, when he's got Michael in his head. And then he gets it. And you can see that he gets it, and you can see his remorse on realizing what he actually did. But until then, he's just looking at it like, got to get Sammy back. And I never took Sam's infamous, if you want to work, we can work. If you want to be brothers, drift off. Or that in the same situation, no, Dean, I wouldn't. Because everybody overlooks that Sam says in the same situation, meaning I would not let you be violated by an angelic presence you didn't want. That's the same situation, not like I'm going to let you die, which is how Dean takes it and goes off on a snit.
And most of fandom.
Most of the fandom that still hasn't forgiven Sam for that when that's not what he said. And at least my headcanon when he says, if you want to be brothers, the end of that sentence is, we have to rebuild the trust. I have to be able to trust you. Not, I never want to be brothers with you again. It's that there's a different level of trust necessary to be brothers as opposed to working cases together. Mm-hmm. I thought that was fairly obvious. Apparently not. That's probably my biggest beef with fan interpretation of this season, because I don't think that's what Sam said or meant. And even in the last episode, when Dean's dying, he says, I thought you wouldn't save me. And Sam says, well, I lied. But of course Sam saves him. So that's kind of my nitpick with the season, as well as I just want to smack the smirk off Metatron's face. But he plays that
right there with you.
Well,
yeah,
he plays it so well for you to hate him so much. And I know the actor is a wonderful person, but do I hate Metatron? So
does Metatron seem like a cheap, ripped off Chuck to anybody else?
No.
He's
okay.
Better at being bad than Chuck.
Yeah, he's his own brand of.
No, this is a guy who is picking out his wardrobe and saying, which of these makes me look more pathetic? That is not Chuck at all.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Yeah. And then making sure he has the jacket with the elbow patches for his author look and everything.
Yeah, he's
very masterpiece theater.
He's dissecting things and trying to costume himself to play each part. He's really orchestrating it. He's a master manipulator more so than Chuck. Mm-hmm. Chuck is almost a child compared to Metatron.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that about Metatron being a manipulator. He's on that level with like a Bernie Madoff, who knows exactly how to or a really manipulative politician who's good at being bad, who knows how to be whatever he needs to be for whatever audience is in front of him. So it's very intentional, which is probably why I hated Metatron quite so much, because those kinds in the real world just make my skin crawl, and he was so good at being that.
Relatable. We could relate to him, even though he was doing things on this cosmic scale. Like you said, he's he's the scummy kind of guy we could meet, you know, around the block. And so it's really easy
Yeah.
to get, you know,
He's
comfortable
the
hating him.
He's the abusive wellness guru. He's the, you know, he's the creepy preacher. He's the guy who gets your trust and then works you over. Yeah, he was good at all of that. The other thing is we have the infamous episode Bloodlines, which honestly, I'll take Bugs any day over Bloodlines.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I went through that one again, and I am appalled that they thought that that was going to work for anything. They introduced way too many characters and way too much stuff going on. And they made absolutely zero of the characters likable or relatable. Zero. There is nothing redeemable about that episode whatsoever.
You didn't even have a ripoff of like the Vampire Diaries with having a good werewolf brother and a bad werewolf brother. Wouldn't have been original, but it could have worked. Or warring werewolf factions where it was a personal vendetta. You're right. You know,
There are countless ways it could have gone.
we didn't walk away feeling anything for anybody, and the boys were barely in it.
Well, they were trying desperately to make it different from Supernatural while set in the same world. And they were trying so hard to do that they lost sight of, you know, start small and they left it just not making any sense. And they changed the rules on Shapers without explaining why.
Abysmal.
And why on earth, after all of these times where somebody runs into monsters and they listen to their stories, they always read them in? Did they turn around that one time and read this guy and say, no, there's no such thing as monsters, sorry? This is like the one time. And they did that to poor Ennis. He's the guy they're going to say, no, you're wrong. You didn't see anything. Your fiance was killed by, well, we don't know.
A bear.
Yeah, a bear that you saw throw her against the wall.
Right. In the middle of downtown Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they shot it in Chicago.
Right. Oh, it was so horrible.
Yeah.
So the Entertainment Weekly rankings of what were the essential episodes were, I think I'm going to like it here, which of course sets up the whole Gadriel thing. And of course, we also get the ain't no me if there ain't no you line, even though we think Dean says that, or at least he gives it to Gadriel to say as him. We get Cass in his boxers at the laundromat, and Dean's comment about having the King of Hell in my trunk. So.
And it wasn't a euphemism.
No.
Yes.
Then we had Holy Terror. And that's where Kevin gets killed. Firstborn, which is Crowley and Dean going looking for the first blade and getting the mark. Do you believe in miracles? Which is where Dean is locked in the bunker dungeon. And here we have our mirror image of Sam in the panic room, coughing up blood like Sam in the trials, because Supernatural loves its mirrors. And Metatron's working on becoming the new god. And Sam and Gadriel and Cass do their little jailbreak thing in heaven. And Dean dies. And then gets turned into a demon. So there are very few episodes that Entertainment Weekly considered to be essential. What do you think?
I actually agree. This week, I agree completely with Entertainment Weekly in terms of the real story hard hitters. Those are exactly the ones I have checked off for, like, if you gotta watch, these are the ones you have to hit. They're all crucial moments, you know, Dean getting the mark, finding out Metatron's agenda, all of that are just bang on. I would say as secondaries, I would go to Mother's Little Helper, where we get that backstory on Abaddon getting into the scene, King of the Damned, where Abaddon is actually finally gets killed. And those two really are probably the most, you know, I mean, the others, there's good, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of other good episodes, but I mean, in terms of that, here we are on the main points here. Those are, to me, the big hitters.
I'd throw Captives into that pile too. Captives is the one where we find out for the first time that people aren't going into heaven, that it's closed to souls. We find out that Kevin's mom is alive.
Right.
Those are relatively critical pieces.
I might also even throw in Road Trip, where, you know, Crowley is very much the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and is pivotal in finally getting Gadriel out of Sam, you know, in a really great scene there and everything. So that one too might be one of those second tier would
for future references. Sharp Teeth ends up being important later, because that's where we find out Garth is a werewolf.
Yeah.
Well,
And Garth being a werewolf becomes important in later seasons.
well, and The Purge introduces us to
Donna.
Donna, and we get to see Dean in a hairnet and Sam in yoga pants, which
Is just too awesome to believe.
Yeah.
And also, I find it perfectly believable that anyone would say, I don't care what they're doing, I lost 10 pounds in a day. I think that place would be incredibly popular.
Well,
It's
and I didn't really think that the marks were any worse than if you've ever seen somebody who's had
cupping. Yeah,
They
absolutely.
weren't weren't any worse.
I can get that done pretty much at the, you know, day spa down the street, minus the sucking part. If I lost 10 pounds too, yeah, I could deal with some bruising. So yeah.
I had the Purge
I
down
think
as
she
one-
would have been very popular.
I had the Purge down as one of my fun ones, because I really did enjoy meeting Donna and everything. I also had Bad Boys down as a fun one, you know, fun because of the flashback and everything. And really is one of the ones are we gonna talk about the other?
Oh, sure. But
actors and all?
Melissa, anything else you wanted to throw in here before we move on?
Do you believe in miracles? Because of the line, I'm proud of us. Like, I think like that's just one of those iconic lines, especially because it ties back to Carry On. And okay, metafiction, because it's got Gabriel. I don't care about the plot. It's got a lot of Gabriel. That makes me happy. So to me, that's an essential. I literally, my notes say, who cares about the plot? Like, I don't even remember what happens. I just remember that there's a lot of Gabriel in it. It was fun. So I'm happy.
Okay, I'm going to point out something weird about this season. I think this is the first season where we've got 2 episodes that feature monsters that are not monsters, that are just people, which we don't get all that often. You know, people do the darndest things, but Thin Man is just 2 guys that decided they would go and be the Thin Man. And Bloodlines, it's just a guy there were all those monsters, and it turned out it was just a guy who was pissed because they killed his kid.
I didn't even remember that because I blocked it out of my memory so much.
Same.
I take notes. I take copious notes. And Monster Not Really a Monster is one of those things I take notes on. And I thought that was kind of odd. And these people didn't come near to the Benders in the creep factor. They were just guys.
Yeah. Now with Blade Runner, we got to see Cuthbert Sinclair's secret lair. And just like the other chapter houses and the Campbell Library, I would really love to have seen more of Cuthbert's whole underground bunker. And I'd love to have seen the guys go back there and clean out all the books and the artifacts and whatever happened to his shifter zoo. I mean, did those things just like eat each other down there? I mean, what happened? So I would have loved to have gone back and seen that. The other thing I hated about Thin Man is Supernatural has its mirrors, and it always has episodes where what's happening with usually brother characters is a reflection of the Winchesters. But this one was so heavy-handed and stupid, and I'm not a Ghostface fan to start with. And so I just felt like I was getting sledgehammered on, look, this is Sam and Dean, they have problems, look, watch. And so it was like, okay, let's just heap this all into an episode about two guys I'd never liked in the first place.
I like the ghost. I mean, I've enjoyed the Ghost Facers and their other episodes, but this one, yes, it was very heavy-handed. And I really hated, Ed and Harry were simple people, and they had this relationship for so long. And I really hated that got twisted, the way it did. And then that schism that, will never be bridged. There's just no way they can come back from that. And that was just so sad to me, that between those two things, I was just like, yeah, I don't need to see that one again.
Ed and Harry were fun when they were two guys that had a goofy web series.
Right.
And they ran around chasing things, not when they were a guy that made up a monster to write a book to capitalize on what people do.
Well, and to reconnect, to make sure that they stayed connected, because one of them was drifting and he wanted to make sure he didn't lose his partner in crime and kept him in. And then, then the one who's been duped is like, I could have had something here. Now I have nothing because I don't have that and I don't have you. So now I've lost twice, and that's just like, yeah.
Well, and they know the dangers of creating a tulpa.
Right.
Because they were around when that happened. That was a previous Ghostfacers episode. Why would they risk doing that again?
Yeah, that one had so many problems, and I wasn't a fan of I thought the schism between Sam and Dean for the season was very forced. And I really hate when characters do stupid things just because lazy writers are trying to move the plot along. And I thought it just seemed so manufactured. And then you throw in, and in case you weren't paying attention, look, here's a metaphor. It's like, it was just a bit much. Alex Annie Alexis Ann, is another Monster of the Week episode, and it is setting up Alex, who ends up with Jody, who ends up being prospectively one of the Wayward Sisters.
It sets up Jody as the collector of strays.
Mm-hmm. It never grabbed me the way I think it was meant to. But the Wayward Sisters thing didn't grab me as much as it's grabbed other people. So it just might have been me. It was an okay Monster of the Week, but it wasn't one that was going, oh, I can't wait to see what happens to her. Anybody else with thoughts on that one?
Well, Supernatural is all about family and the bond between brothers. And this was just showing us that there can be other kinds of families, and even worse, you could create a bond with monsters. And it's got a whole nother thing. And it was the first time you see that. It's really unexpected because, Jody thought she was rescuing somebody and she just didn't get the whole, but that's my family. Yeah, I get they're monsters and all, but they're my family, and these are the people that I love. And families can be terrible, but
or at the very least, these are the people who have taken care of me, all this time, and they're the only ones who have shown any concern for my well-being and everything, but
in many ways they were better parents to her than John Winchester was to the boys. They didn't leave her alone for periods of time with
That's a whole nother kettle of fish, and I'm not sure we want to get into that here.
No, no, but
Let's
there are reasons why
because of
she
the
was so
season.
attached to them, despite the fact that it was terrible parenting
Mhm.
and they were drinking her blood when they didn't have anyone else.
Well, and going back to the whole Gadriel arc for the season and the rift between the brothers, Sam will make just as bad choices when Dean's life is on the line as Dean makes for Sam. And in some ways, Sam seeking vengeance is worse because, as I've said before, when Sam dies, Dean gets self-destructive. When Dean dies, Sam burns down the world. And so we see Sam going down the same road that he did those missing 6 months in Mystery Spot when he was going after the trickster to avenge Dean. We saw the same, he forces that guy into making a deal so he can trap a demon, which is no more, or I mean, that's not any less moral than drinking demon blood from Ruby. Sam is still trying to make up for not having looked for Dean in purgatory. And so he's going to move heaven and hell in order to prove that he is committed to Dean. And a lot of that plays out in the next season after Dean's a demon and he's trying to bring Dean back. But I think we see that beginning here when he's looking for how to save him from the mark, and the next season how to save him from being a demon. Any thoughts about that?
The first picture that leaps into my mind is, and I can't remember specifically which episode it is, but in the throes of Mark of Cain, I don't want to say ecstasy, but really that's what it was like. He has slaughtered these, he hasn't just killed them, he has slaughtered them. And Sam walks in and is horrified. And he says, just tell me you had to do it. Like, tell me that you had to do it, because he doesn't want to think about his brother having such savage bloodlust that he had to like rip these people apart, and that's I think when the horror of what's happening to Dean really, really hits him. He's like, up until now, it's been like, okay, we're not happy about this. This is unpleasant, but it's a means to an end. And I think this is when he realizes we are so in over our head, what the heck are we going to do now? And that's just a really.
Well, part of that too is because Sam wasn't there when Dean met Kane.
Mm-hmm.
And he just didn't get the whole significance of the mark of Kane. It was just the name of the thing.
Right. And a thing on his arm. And
the whole biblical thing about, that in Firstborn, when they walk up and Crowley realizes who the beekeeper is and is like, we got to leave right now. That's the father of murder. And he just freaks out. How many people is Crowley actually afraid of? When he runs into Abaddon, he just gets snarky. But Kane scared the crap out of him. Mm-hmm. So much so he was ready to bug out.
Yeah.
That says something about just how frightening he is.
Yeah, and I think you're right that because Sam wasn't there, he didn't understand how much power was really in there. But after that, he sure does, and then he's really watching his brother after that, thinking, oh my God, we may kill Abaddon, but there's going to be hell to pay after that. What are we going to do after that? So he's starting to finally think about the long game there.
Dean has always been I will do whatever it takes now, and I will figure out how to fix the problem after. If I need the first blade, the mark of Cain, sure. We'll figure out how to take it off later after we've killed the current problem.
If I've got to save Sam, well, he'll be alive. He can hate me then, but at least he'll be alive.
Exactly.
Just like in the beginning of the season when he stuffs a Gadriel in him.
Well,
He's gonna be pissed at me, but I don't care because he'll be alive.
I found the fact that the arc they had for Gadriel really fascinating when it
Mhm.
turned out who exactly he was, and that he because of what he did, he'd spent all that time in Heaven's jail, and that he actually is redeemed throughout the season to the point where he's willing to sacrifice himself for Castiel at the end.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought that having a redemption arc for Gadriel was a really interesting twist that I hadn't seen coming.
Mhm. Mhm.
Melissa, you've been quiet.
You guys are all making the points, so I'm just gonna sit here and nod and agree with you.
Okay, Carole, you were going to say something.
I was just gonna say that I thought Tammo really played that well. He really embodied that that turn, that phasing from, it's all about me surviving to let me actually help with the greater good. He did that.
It's all about me not being in jail anymore from where I've been for millennia.
Right.
I made one mistake, just one mistake, and they threw me in jail forever.
So I thought he really did a great job with that. And I, of course, Elena Huffman killed as Abaddon. I freaking adored her. Like she was kind of over the top, but that's how Abaddon was. I mean, give me that bright red lipstick and the tight t-shirt with the demon chick on it. And, she took that bit between her teeth and she ran with it. It was delicious. Delicious.
Yes. And Jared playing Gadriel, like I was like, how long did he study the other actor whose name I can never pronounce?
Emma.
How much film did he watch? Because he just, like, I've seen the actor in a bunch of different things and he just nailed it. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, that's a little scary. But that was just a brilliant performance.
Mhm.
Loved seeing him on screen.
We didn't need the blue eyes to know when it was Gadriel. They were just like, okay, fine, angels have blue eyes, but you knew the second.
Well, it was one of those times when Sam stands up straight and squares his shoulders, because Sam usually slouches. And when he was Gadriel, he stood up and rolled those shoulders back, wings or not, and he stood tall. And so you could really see that physical change as well as his expressions. And Jared did a great job
of
with
his
that
speech.
Mm-hmm.
Tammo spoke a little slower and a little more gravely than Sam does, and all of that was wonderful.
Now, I thought in the forced errors category, the whole we've killed Abaddon, let's sew her head back on and bring her back because she might be useful,
was among the most stupid things they ever could have done.
Yeah, that was just like, really? Come on, you couldn't think of anything better? Because how can this possibly go wrong? And that's one of those forced error things that I hate, where it's just sloppy writing.
Well, and we're not going to sew her hands back on, but we're going to leave them within reach.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think we have to give them enough credit because they had no idea that the hands were related to the Addams family hands and would crawl their way out of the box and over to her. I think that was something that just didn't anticipate.
I still think it would have been interesting if they had her escape without the hands, and the first person she killed, she obtained a pair of hands.
They'd have been stumped.
Or the hands are chasing her for the whole episode. Like they get a hold of the bumper of the Impala and they're just two hands holding on.
I think that was in a scene from the Addams Family movie.
Yeah. They could have gone so many different ways. And the other thing with this season is you also had some music. The one that just changed it forever for me was in Holy Terror, when you have the bus full of angels in their prissy little, white dresses, sweaters, and they're all singing "This Little Light of Mine." which, you know, if you grew up in certain backgrounds, you grew up with that song.
Mhm.
And then they go in and they slaughter all the demon
Bikers.
bikers, and then they come back out still singing the song, get on the youth group bus. I'm never going to hear that song the same way again.
Mm-mm. Not ever.
And by the way, they were really good at 4-part a cappella harmony, even covered with blood. But if you grew up with that song and had other memories associated, that just knocked you for a loop.
It's all over now.
Yeah, it is. Some of the other notable songs we got AC/DC's For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. We got Foreigners, I Want to Know What Love Is in Dog Bean Afternoon. We got Misha humming the theme of the Greatest American
Is
Hero.
that when he sees the poodle? Sorry.
So, and in Captives, we get Lonely as the Night. You know, in The Purge, we get Up Where We Belong from Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warren and that movie. Officer and Gentleman.
Yes, Officer and Gentleman.
Yes.
So we did have some interesting music that went through the season as well. What haven't we talked about? What did we skip?
Wayward
Ones did we
Sisters. Wayward Sisters. I hate to bring it up, but I think we have to face it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you already know where I'm coming from.
You loved it, didn't you?
Oh my gosh, it was the best. I'm sorry. My part of it, can I go ahead? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Part of it is because when they first were talking about the spinoff after the fiasco of Bloodlines, and they were talking about Jody and Donna, and I was like, oh, that's great. We have characters we already know and have some investment in, especially Jody. We've seen them together and they have chemistry and stuff. What a great vector for new stories, you know. Yeah, did we have Claire at that point? Well,
Yeah.
we had Claire.
Yeah.
And we had Alex, whatever. So that was fine. So I'm like, okay, fine, you know, and they're going to be training them and they're going to be, you know, cases and stuff. And I was really excited about it. Really excited about it. I'm like, they know what they're doing. They're doing the right thing this time. Go them. And then all of a sudden the focus went from Jody and Donna to half a dozen teenage girls, most of whom we didn't know, didn't give a rat's ass about. And in fact, in the providing of these girls, lost a canon character that we deeply adored, being Missouri. They had to kill Missouri off so that we could dislodge her family so that we got patience. I'm sorry. I would have stuck with Missouri. Missouri could have been in the spinoff. And the fact that they went to this whole paradigm shift to me completely negated a lot of the respect I had for it. I'm like, I know this is the CW. You had your girls in there. That's fine. Get the girls in there and have them do stuff. Absolutely. Please don't have them be the focus of the show. We don't know them. We don't care about them. You could have woven them in throughout you know, even a half a season. Start with your 4 people that we know and then introduce some of these other ones. Weave them in. Make us care about them. That would have been fantastic, you know. And to have them all of a sudden be like, hey, we've been hunters for a week and I know how to do stuff now.
Yeah.
It was just so much wrong to me. And it wasn't just that it was wrong. It was that they squandered the capital they had. They had a vast pool of talent and fans and capital, and they just were like, woohoo. you know.
Well, and you know, we could have had a Cagney and Lacey kind of thing with
So much.
Jody and Donna, and then bring the girls in a little bit at a time.
Yep.
But I thought they also had made Claire so unlikable
Ugh.
that I wasn't quite sure how to come back from that, because, you know, I raised two teenage girls, and yes, there are moments, but not like on TV. I don't know that, you know, that trope of teenage girls just to me is so,
Like biting on tinfoil.
yeah, disrespectful.
Yeah.
And yeah, Claire tried to get Dean killed, and
Yeah.
there was nothing redeemable there. Oh my, traumatic childhood. Welcome to the Winchesters.
Right. Par for the course, sweetie. And yes, having raised a daughter, and I can say, yes, were there moments where she snarked out at me? Absolutely. But you know what counterbalanced them is the moments when she would come up later and we would talk about it, and she would apologize, or I would apologize because maybe I'm the one who was wrong. You had the moments after. We never had any of that with Claire. Nothing. There was nothing that ever said she cared about anybody. And I'm sorry, Sam and Dean had an even worse upbringing than she did, and they managed to care about people, you know. And she was, all I can think is, yeah, she's biting on tinfoil. There was nothing, you know. Alex was so much more approachable. You know, she was damaged and had trauma, but you know what? She was working on growing and maturing and getting, you know, learning to live life. And Claire was just, and so, yeah, so you throw that into the mix, like just get the coarse grade sandpaper out and put it on your face, because it's bad.
Elektra,
If-
Melissa,
Clearly is a topic close to my heart, because I miss so dearly what, you know, Kim Rhodes and Brianna could have brought us. They loved their characters. They were solidly in the universe, and I think it could have been funny, dramatic, all the things that we look to Supernatural for.
well,
And
if you've seen Gunpowder Milkshake,
I have not watched that yet, but I've heard.
okay, imagine Gunpowder Milkshake with Jody, Donna, Ellen, and Missouri, or maybe Annie, the one in the
Annie
foxhole,
Hawkins.
foxhole Annie, and that's Gunpowder Milkshake with a library filled with guns hidden in the books. I mean,
Right.
that
Even if
could have
Missouri
been
not a regular, they could have, you know, from time to time called on her. She could have been like the Bobby or something. You never,
Right.
she can come to them and say, hey, you know, I've got a vision that something's going to happen here. Or such a rich world that was plundered for naught.
So as we come to the end of our time, Elektra and Melissa, anything we haven't covered that you want to get your 2 cents in on?
You got most of them.
Okay.
I just, the shocker at the end of the season, just every time I watch it, it really gets me. And they did a really nice job of setting up all those moments with Crowley and Dean for next season. Where there's an awful lot of Crowley and Dean in this season. The
and
moments.
Yeah, and they harken back to parts of it in Carry On when Dean says how proud he is of Sam, and you can't help but hear, I'm proud of us.
Yep. With Wayward Sisters, I've got to jump back on this. If they needed teenagers, last season they had that teenage girl whose father had been a hunter, and
Percy.
yes, thank you. I'm terrible with names. So they had a set group of teenagers, including a teenage girl who didn't have parents. If they needed to drag a younger group into Wayward Sisters, they could have figured out a way to make that bridge there. They didn't have to end that episode with Chrissy staying with the teenagers. They could have figured out another ending so they could have set themselves up to have her be with Jody. Just they squandered their capital isn't even the beginnings of the word. It's like, well, we don't really care that, we're gonna do this as fan service because some of the women want to see a show with Jody and Donna, so we'll just kind of slap this together, and if it's successful, great. And if it's not successful, well, hey, there's not a market for that. That's what it felt like to me, and I'm bitter about it. Sorry.
Well, and when you look at the Supernatural fandom, the idea that there wouldn't be an audience for women of a certain age kicking ass and taking names, I'm sorry, you haven't paid a whole lot of attention here, have you?
Take a look at the convention audience. I mean, come on. Yes,
Yeah.
there are tons of teenage girls. Don't get me wrong. And it's actually a great show in terms of mothers and daughters, teenagers and adults both enjoy it, and it can be a bridge like that. And well,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, folks, we are at the end of our time. So another wonderful discussion as always, but let's go around and tell everybody where people can find you online, starting with you, Carole.
I'm on Facebook in the TFWNC group, and I'm also on Twitter under true_firesign10, and all of my stories are on AO3 under firesign10.
Awesome. Elektra?
You can find me at www.untilmidnight.com, where you can find everything about me.
And Melissa?
You can find me haunting the Facebook group Supernatural TFWNC, where I'm frequently causing trouble or, laughing at some of the ridiculous photos that you post, because you always make our day happy when you post your photos, Gail.
I try. And you can find me at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com, Supernatural TFWNC, all the rest of the social media, some variation of the name, but most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you to our wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon here on Continual. So we'll see you online.